Folks, he is one half of the most feared, dynamic, popular, iconic tag teams in the history of the WWE. But he's remembered for many other accomplishments, both in and out of the ring, as you're going to discover in this conversation. It's great to welcome Smash of Axe and Smash of Demolition, Barry Darsow. Barry, great to see you again.
Sean, thank you. Thanks for having me on your show. I love it.
Yeah,
Last time
well,
I,
it's
hey, last time I saw you was WrestleCade out at
Wrestle.
WrestleMania.
Yeah, and I was going to start there because I saw you at WrestleCon and hadn't seen you in person in a while. And it was just really awesome to see you guys. And I remember like congratulating you because it was just so awesome to see that you've, reconnected with the WWE and now have legend contracts and walk me through that. Like, how did uh, that relationship thaw with the WWE and now you're back? It's kind of full circle.
It's funny. I don't exactly know what happened, how we kind of fell off the face of the earth with them or not, but just, I was on a few shows, different shows with them over the years as the Repo Man, a couple other things, and it just where they just never talked to us anymore. And
Yeah.
and Bill and I were never the type of guys that would call the office all the time or try to be in the office. And so we were just on our own and happy as heck doing what we were doing. And we never really even thought of, getting a contract with them again. And then they contacted us and we had to kind of discuss it because we like doing what we're doing, just being on our own, having a good time, no pressure. And we didn't know what it was all going to entail. But with Triple H at the helm, we thought, you know what, they're so big right now. You kind of want to be part of it.
Yeah.
And wrestling's been my whole life and Bill's whole life, and we thought, well, let's sign the contract and get some new action figures out there and maybe a video or something. So that's kind of how it all happened.
Yeah, as you mentioned, they are so big now because it's now part of Endeavor, which I don't know if there's any kind of sports entertainment that they aren't involved in. And and I don't want to focus say it was because of the mix up, I guess, or not the mix up, but the change in management there. But that certainly had a lot to do with it. And with maybe it was time for the
Yeah.
WWE to make that next transition.
But
But
a couple of years ago when Vince was still in charge,
Mhm.
we were invited out to WrestleMania by them. And it just so happened the guys that brought us out there had us so busy, we didn't have time to really go to the Hall of Fame or WrestleMania, where last year we just have, I mean, it was in the middle of the night last year, so we had time. So that's why we went to it last year. But,
Yeah.
it was fun seeing everybody there and, reconnecting with everybody.
Yeah, and there's certainly been some great eras, but I'm really blessed and proud to have been part of what I think was the greatest era ever with the WWE. That period of the mid '80s into the early '90s, where like you said, I'm sure a lot of those guys you hadn't seen, but when you reconnect, it probably brought back a lot of memories of just what a
Oh,
great period of time that was for professional wrestling.
it was incredible. And Sean, you were so good at your job also, it seemed like the whole everything that was going on was incredible. I mean, Vince ran a really, really good show and it drew family, it wasn't just, a bunch of hammerheads out there going to the wrestling matches. It was families with their kids and everything. And that's what was so big about it.
Yeah, and you had been part of other territories prior to that, and it was a completely different business when, they had the territories going and you would go between different operations. What was the biggest thing though when you saw this happening and it kind of became, the destination, if you want to really make it, you've got to get to the WWF, which it was at the time. But uh, seeing that and coming up during that period of time, what was that like for professional wrestling and the guys that were out there on the road every day getting it done?
It was crazy because I was just talking to somebody the other day about it. You're in the smaller territories, and when you're there, you think that's the biggest thing possible.
Right.
And like when I was in Crockett's territory, I mean, we're doing the Great American Bash and 20, 30,000 people, and Flair and Dusty and everybody, and it's huge.
Yeah.
But then all of a sudden, when I left there and went up to the New York territory, you get up there and it was a whole different TV, the way everything was set up, and it was like going to the movies when you went up there. It was small handheld cameras in the other place, and now you got TV trucks and cameras in the stands and all over, and it was just a huge production. And the biggest difference was when there was no more kayfabe, you know. Uh,
Right.
we're in the small territories, and the heels coming out of one dressing room and the baby faces out of the other, and you never could talk or do anything. And all of a sudden, at my first TV, you got everybody in the same room coming out of the same door and everything. It was like, wow, they didn't care about that because it was growing so much and it was entertainment now.
Yeah, and I've talked with people over the years of what a transition it was, though, because in many ways it was still kind of the Wild West, which you knew very well, and then you had this collision with basically corporate America because that's what Vince did with it. People would say uh, when people had a beef or guys got receipts in the ring, it was or you settled it backstage, and then you had people like me. I came from another world and we were all kind of colliding. But it really was still pretty much old school professional wrestling when it came down to it.
Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. And when I walked into the dressing room, I'm 320, an old power lifter, and I'm not saying I'm a tough guy or anything, but you can handle your own, and you walk in that
Mm.
dressing room and you're one of the smaller guys,
Yeah,
you shake hands and all of a sudden, you got Andre the Giant and Hulk Hogan and Snuka and Paul Orndorff. I mean, you got guys that, you had Dusty and Flair in that territory. Now you got 20 of those guys in your dressing room. It was pretty intimidating almost at first, until you get locked in, and then all of a sudden you know everybody again. But it was
yeah,
just a great experience, and
yeah,
I miss that right now.
yeah. I mean that collection of talent was, when you're doing it, you don't realize it at the time. But just think about just the tag team division, where you've never seen that again in history, where you had you know, 10, 12, 14 legit tag teams that weren't just guys thrown together. Doing Demolition, the Rockers, the Hart Foundation, and there was as many tag teams it seemed as there were singles.
Right.
What do you think it was about that era that made tag team competition so popular?
I don't know, but it was, I was just in a great position with Bill that we got to be able to hold the belts for so long. Because at that time, any one of those teams you're talking about could have been the champions.
Yeah,
And I don't, I think Vince probably trusted us because we pretty much did everything that he asked, and we didn't ask questions. And, we were marketable, and I think we were pretty good in the ring with all the different tag teams. But, I don't, like you said, I don't think there'll ever be tag teams again, and I don't know why they ever got away from that. And I heard rumors it could just cost too much money to bring that many people into the towns, but I don't buy that because
yeah,
I thought the tag matches were just phenomenal, and I think it was a major part of the shows. And now they just throw two guys together or four guys together that are already there, and they don't want to take the time to make those tag teams anymore. Where back then they took the time to make them.
yeah. And you mentioned something here. Well, even you getting into the WWF was an act of fate. You had basically told Crockett, I'm out because he didn't pay you what he should have paid you. And but it's so funny that I remember you talking about how you didn't know if you're going to go to Japan or you're going to try and pick up dates, and then all of a sudden this happens with Bill. But you mentioned that you've always had kind of this core of the way you looked at things and did things right, and I think that had a lot to do with it too, because Bill probably had heard of your reputation. I know you knew him, but if he didn't know the way that you worked and how you conducted yourself, that probably wouldn't have happened.
Right, right. Yeah, exactly. We had, I knew his friends and he knew my friends, so I knew what kind of person he was. He knew what kind of person I was. And our work ethic, we had a really good work ethic. And the first thing to us was our families at home. The second
Yeah.
thing was work. But when we worked, that's what we did. So when we were on the road for three weeks at a time, it was, get up in the morning, fly to the town, go to the gym, eat right, go to the town, think about our matches, and try to heal from the night before. And we didn't go out and party every night and everything. Not saying that we didn't, but
Yeah.
we weren't out drinking and gallivanting around all the time because our thought was make the money and get home so you can be with your kids and your wife. And that's kind of what both of our lives were about, and it still is to this day.
Yeah. And I think that that was also, you realized the opportunity that you had, and you weren't going to screw it up.
Right.
As we saw many, many guys along the road that just got caught up in it and ended up, really paying the price, not taking that road as far as they could have, and then also a lot of them with tragic endings.
Right. And,
With
and
that
Bill
though,
and Bill was the greatest partner for me because you know I could have went the other way where I was out you know drinking and carousing and doing everything, but it just was I wanted to be past that point. That was my younger years of goofing around and everything, and this was strictly business when I got up there.
yeah.
And I think that's what Vince saw also. It was Bill was a great partner to be around.
But I'm sure that also started with earlier, and really part of this conversation today, Barry, is I wanted to talk more about the person, like how you became, because I think people can learn a lot from people who travel a journey to success. And I imagine that that work ethic and your beliefs and that kind of thing started probably when you were very young. I don't know if it was coaches or you had your father or other very good male role models along the way. What was it you think with you?
I think it was, my dad left my mom when I was in about fourth grade. So my mom raised me and my brother and my sister, and she worked a full-time job and took care
Hmm.
of us. And she would never just give us things. It was always, you got to go out and shovel, you got to go out and mow the lawn, you got to go do this and that. And we actually had jobs when we were young. Our my brother and my sister were the same. It was, eighth grade I had a paper route. Ninth grade I'm working at, you know, uh, fast food places and this, it just that's how it started because without working, you didn't make it in life. And it was the same for baseball.
Hmm.
My brother would say, "Hey, you got to get out there and throw the balls. Here, I'll pitch to you." So where everybody else was in the house doing something or whatever, I'm out hitting the baseball or shooting 100 hockey pucks or that was my life. And I just knew in order to be better than somebody, you had to do way more than they were. And things didn't come to me real easy. I had to really work at it. But I was very good at everything I did. And I think it was that work ethic. And that kind of went into wrestling. It was that same thing. I didn't just go to the wrestling camp and do a few moves for an hour and I was done. Me and Rick Rude would go out in the backyard and we'd wrestle for 2, 3, 4 hours, learning the moves. So then the next day when you went to camp, you could get past that one and go to the next one. And even after I made it in wrestling, I still would do that kind of stuff. I'd come off of a 3 week tour and I'd go over to Brad Ringens' ring and, wrestle with Wayne Bloom and him and Kurt Hennig and the Road Warriors would go over there and guys from Japan and, the Nasty Boys and, all different guys over at Brad Ringens' ring. And that's what we did. It was just, that
Well,
was our life.
it's interesting you mentioned that your mom raised you. I grew up in kind of very similar circumstances. My father was gone when I was very young, and my mom raised five kids as a school teacher, and uh, and I think that's a whole different show at some point that you have this when you grow up like that and things don't come easy. But my mom was the same way, and I'm sure that has something to do with it. people that, decide. I always used to say that, you got a fork in the road. These people, you don't become average. You either become a
Yeah.
victim or you say, I'm going to really achieve. But along the way, you also need good role models in your life, and it doesn't necessarily have to be an older person. I know that you mentioned Rick Rude, and I don't know if you think it was some kind of magic, but we talk about Robbinsdale and those guys that were there with Kurt Hennig and Brady Boone and Nikita Koloff, all these guys going to that high school. It's phenomenal to think not only that these guys all became professional wrestlers and successful at it, but just that group of guys. And I know that, they became very lifelong friends to you. But what kind of an influence was it like for you to be around those guys at that point in your
Well,
life?
yeah, it was incredible because, and you mentioned earlier about coaches and stuff. Coaches and teachers were a major part for me too, because
Yeah.
being where we didn't have any money and my dad was gone and my mom didn't even have a driver's license.
Uh,
When I played hockey, the hockey coach would come and pick me up to take me to practices and everything. And all my coaches were like they were just really good uh helpers to people. And it wasn't just me on the team, it was other people and I learned from them. And Rick and Kurt and all these guys, they all went through kind of the same thing I did, where, you wanted to be better than everybody. And it just so happened that our friends were like, and maybe that's why we got to be friends, because we always wanted to be better than everybody else. And there was a weightlifting coach, his name was Jerry McFarland in junior high, and he was Mr. Minnesota, and he was a health teacher at the junior high.
mhm.
And he created a weight room in the junior high at that time that was better than probably any weight room in the country, in any high school. And it was better than a lot of colleges. And that was in our junior high. And everybody went to that gym after school. And, he was kind of the guy that got everybody weightlifting. And then once you were weightlifting, then all of a sudden he'd have you out running and he'd have you. So by the time you were playing football or baseball, you were already in better shape than the guys that didn't go to that gym. And that's kind of how everything went our whole life. And like before Kurt got into the wrestling business, he called me up and he says, "Hey Barry, you mind if I train with you and Wayne at the
Yeah.
gym?" And I
Yeah.
said, "Kurt, I think it'd be great." So Kurt came and started training with us at the gym, and because he knew we were going to train hard and we were going to get him ready for wrestling. So by the time he went to Vern's camp, he was already ahead of a lot of guys that went there. So that was just our mentality, all of us guys. And I think
Yeah.
that's why we did so well.
It's astounding though to think about it. And of course the Kurt Hennig connection because his dad, of course. But that was also an area, and I think there were other wrestlers that had gone before you at Robbinsdale just because of the location, because of the wrestling organization there. But the fact that it kind of brought other people into it is really amazing. Then of course, Grandma Bees, you guys all work there, and that's where you hook up with uh, Road Warriors, Mike and Joe. Uh, it really is amazing. I don't know, active whatever, but to bring you guys all together, and I don't think that happened anywhere else in the country. But
No.
it just seemed like it was more than professional wrestling as far as laying down a road, a path for you guys that you would travel for your life. I mean, I don't know if you had any idea that, gee, this is what I want to do because you were an athlete. Maybe you wanted to be a professional athlete somehow, but that this came up, that this
Yeah,
happened.
my, I had a full scholarship to the University of Northern Iowa in football,
Uh-huh.
and I was a pretty good football player. I hate to brag or anything, but just telling it the way it is. And I got there, and I thought I was going to be an offensive guard, and I was really fast and really strong. And when I got there, they moved me to center. And I met with the coach and I said, "Coach, I don't want to play center." And they just happened to have two of the best centers in the country at that time.
Uh-huh.
They were ahead of me. And it's like, well, how am I going to play? And my whole life, all I've done is played. I worked hard. I've done everything. And it really discouraged me. And then I had a really hard time in college with the classes, and I always did really well in school. And then it was hard for me in those classes and it was hard in the football. So my pro football dream was kind of going down the tubes, and I ended up quitting college. And when I went home, my mom says, "You quit a full ride at college?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, I'm going to do something else. And right away, she says, "Well, you better go get a job tomorrow." I
No.
mean, that was her way of doing it. And I said, "Well, I got a couple other angles." And, that's when I went up and visited a couple of my buddies up at Morehead State and ended up having two jobs. And I got on the powerlifting team up there. And then I started training, and that's when I moved home, worked at Grandma V's. I mean, everything worked out, and it was
Yeah.
because of the hard work, you know. But God, I killed myself, two and three jobs while you're working out and trying to wrestle, and But I guess it's just grained in your head because my brother, he went to school, he worked a couple of jobs, it was just crazy. My sister, same way. So I don't know if it's you know, because of my mom or because of all my friends that drove me and I helped drive them or what it was. But, no matter who you are, you have to have somebody help you somewhere. And
Yeah.
thank God I had a lot of people to help me. And I think the people that don't make it, they don't have the people that'll help you. They turn them the wrong way and, maybe commit crimes
Yeah.
so
Like I said, you choose a path, and
yeah,
it's
you choose a
yeah,
path.
yeah. That's when it comes down to it. Uh, it kind of prepared you. Getting into professional wrestling today, and I always say I'm not knocking how things happen, but now you see, guys that are coming in through the professional ranks. In many cases, they might be D1 athletes. Well, you know, that kind of thing, or they've been used to, traveling a pretty easy road in a sense of, I'm not saying they didn't work hard, but to get to different places and elevate themselves. Back then, especially in professional wrestling, if you told somebody you're getting into professional wrestling, they're like, "Are you out of your mind?
Yeah,
You're
why
not going
would
to
you
make
do
any
that?
money. Yeah, you're going to drive, it's going to beat your body to a pulp every day." And you really had to want it. So you look at that path that you traveled and adversity you face, because back then, and I always like to talk about it because I don't think people really understand how tough a business it was just to get in the door. And then, you had to love it because you weren't going to make any money. Just how rough was it back then to get in?
It was really hard. Um, when when Joe and Mike, the Road Warriors, and Rick and I were training, it was time for big guys to get in again. We were right at a really lucky time getting in. It was the
Hmm.
Crusher, the Bruiser, Baron von Reschke. All these guys were starting to get to be the older guys, so they needed new young talent coming in. And with our work ethic and being in shape and looking good and everything, you know, it was a good time to get in. And when Ole Anderson saw us all, he was the one that really kind of, gave us our big break from. But
How bad were you when you started?
I was
'Cause
terrible.
I know you're
I
tough.
mean, when I was at that camp, I thought I was the greatest wrestler of all
Uh,
time.
uh,
And then my first match, I get to Hawaii, Honolulu, Hawaii, and I meet Mark Lewin, and Mark Lewin doesn't know that I'm good or not. And he says, "Hey, let's you and I have a match in the Blaisdell." And I'm thinking, this is Mark Lewin. He's one of the top wrestlers of all time, and I'm thinking I'm a big shot. And I get out there, and when I locked up with him, he goes, "Whoa, whoa, wait a minute, I was the stiffest guy he's ever seen in his life.
uh, uh,
But I had to learn awful fast because then I started getting putting with guys that are kind of crowbars to get me back. And but yeah, what a lot of people don't think, like when you were talking about you get into wrestling and you really don't know what it's all about. The fan doesn't, but
yeah.
everybody's got an ego too, and you might be the best at hockey and football, and you great in college, and then you get to that ring, and you have no clue really what you're doing when you get in that ring, no matter how good an athlete you are. And when you're told you got to get beat by some old guy that shouldn't even be in the ring anymore, and you're two and three times his size, your ego just kind of goes,
uh,
and you got to say to yourself, can I really be in this business or not? Because you might end up being beat. every match the rest of your life. Who's to say that you're going to be the winner? You know,
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's pretty mind blowing, but you got to have confidence in yourself, and you got to get to be so good that the promoter is not going to beat you. And that's
Yeah.
kind of the mentality that you have to have. And you have to be what the people want to see.
Yeah. Well, and if you wouldn't have had an attitude adjustment, then probably a lot of these veterans who you've credited
Yeah.
along with your career, Ivan Koloff and Bill, of course, and so many others
Yeah.
that really took you under their wings.
Yeah.
You probably wouldn't have survived or had the
Right.
success that you found.
The greatest story ever was we're in camp, and I mean we're young guys and we're in shape. And Ole Anderson comes to the camp, and Eddie Sharkey's training us. And Ole leaves, and we're all excited because we met Ole Anderson. He's the guy that's been on TV forever, and
Hmm.
we're like, star-studded looking at him. And all of a sudden, the phone rings about a week later. Calls Joe. Joe comes into camp. He goes, "You'll never guess what, guys. I'm going to Atlanta, Georgia."
Hmm.
And we're so excited for Joe. In our heads we're going, well, why him and why not me?
You're right.
Well,
Yeah.
Ole just wanted that look, and so we're all excited for Joe. Joe flies out. He's gone for about a week. He comes back, comes to camp. His head's down like this, and we're looking at him going, Joe, what's the deal? He goes, you wouldn't believe what happened to me. And I said, well, did you like it? He goes, it was the worst experience I've ever had in my life. I said, so you're saying we shouldn't get into wrestling? He goes, God, if it's like that, I sure don't want to wrestle. I said, well, what happened? He says, well, look at us. We're 22, 23 years old, the best shape out of anybody out there. He says, I had to work with Johnny Weaver, who was about 65 years old. I'm sitting across from him in front of this huge crowd. He throws me in and gives me the sleeper after about 2 minutes and puts me down. He beats me with the sleeper. He says that went on every night. That was my matches,
Yeah.
and
Well,
we were laughing. And you had to look at that and go, well, that's what our life is going to be like.
yeah.
But you had to
Lessons
look past
learned.
that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then
Lessons learned, right?
yeah, and then a couple of weeks later, he calls again. He says, I want you and Mike. You're going to be the Road Warriors, and that's how it all started. All he had to see if he would do a job for Johnny Weaver. That was
Yeah.
it.
How crazy was it then? People think that they've seen, rabid fans in the WWE, but they have no idea. Hacksaw Jim Duggan talks about Mid-South and how they used to blow the arena roof off that place with the Junkyard Dog, and but that where they would basically have police escorts, and I'm not talking just police, like SWAT team to get them in and out of the ring. How crazy was it? It's in some of these towns back then before the WWF,
It was unbelievable. And
right?
you're talking about Hacksaw Jug, and I had a big angle with him. I don't know if he mentioned it to you, but I had these matches. They were called coal miner glove matches, and I was a Russian. And Nikolai Volkov was my partner, and
Hmm.
we were the biggest heels ever. I mean, it was a bad time to be a Russian, and down there they believed everything we did.
Yeah.
And we were in the ring one time, and Jim had the glove, and he was going up to get it up, or he was going up to get the glove on a big, huge, pole,
Yeah.
and he was just about there, and Nikolai came out and pulled him off, and we started putting the boots to him, and I went up and got the glove, and it had a big steel hinge on it, and I was hitting him with this hinge, and Jim looks up at me and he says, Crush, he goes, you got to get out of here. And I was looking and people were starting to jump out of the balconies.
Oh my God.
And then
Yeah.
the cop sitting ringside, he took a chair and slid it in the ring to give it to Jim Duggan. And Nikolai got it. And Nikolai started hitting him. The people started riding and beating up the cop. And and I said to Nikolai, I said, we got to get out of here now, because now they're coming in the ring, and we were hooking and jabbing and trying to get him out of the ring. And pretty
And that's a
soon,
long way back to the curtain at that
oh
point,
my
right?
God! And we were fighting all the way back, and Duggan's in the ring selling a bloody mess and everything, and people are in the ring trying to help him up, and I mean, that was every night there. It was
Yeah.
crazy, but being in the business now for about a year or 2 years. and had 400 or 500 matches. I finally
Wow.
felt so good because I did my job. I was a heel, and my job was to get those people to hate me. It was like winning the Stanley Cup. I mean,
Yeah.
it was that important to me to be that good.
Well, and how much fun was it to be a heel? I know that it
Oh,
wasn't necessarily money, but in cases, some cases, but I guess merchandise wasn't the big deal then. But you always talk to all the guys say, "Oh God, it's so much fun to be a heel."
it was,
Oh,
you look at all the baby faces and they got all the girls and they're making all the money and, they're riding in the limousines and here we got the beat up cars because everybody throws rocks at you and beats you up and,
so,
you don't get anything. The girls hate you. I mean, it's the
uh,
worst thing in the world, but it's the greatest feeling in the world in the ring to be able to make the people love you, hate you, cry, I mean, it's just unbelievable.
yeah, it was just an amazing time, and I just another side note on that. I remember Jim saying how they used to tell what kind of a house it was going to be by how many fights there were in the crowd before the first match.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Well, and then you'd get Junkyard Dog and Duggan together as partners, and me and
yeah,
Nikolai against them. It was like, holy cow!
yeah,
Oh, a lot of
wow,
fun. But but the worst part of all of this is it ends sometime.
yeah.
You get old, you get hurt, you get to where the boss doesn't want you to be there anymore, and I mean, and just and you leave a territory.
Yeah,
That's
well,
just
and Vince took them apart one at a time, so there were less places to go,
yeah,
and you hope, as they say, everybody goes to different places, and you get a new gimmick. I know you just wanted to get to the big stage. You probably had no idea what was going to happen as far as this new gimmick that they were going to give you. I know you talk about how Vince called you. You get on the plane. I remember they would bring the guys up. You get, the limousine treatment, and it's the big time.
it's a big
But at that point, you'll do anything.
yeah.
As far as whatever they've got playing, you just hope it's something good. But they have you sign this, non-disclosure, and they tell you about demolition. Uh, a trip must have just got even better when you sat in that room and Vince laid it out.
Oh, it was unreal. And
Uh,
at first, Vince doesn't come in the room. You meet with Terry Garvin, you talk to him for a little while, and then Pat Patterson comes in and introduces himself,
yeah,
and then all of a sudden Vince comes in, and then he's got this big book with all these pictures of all these different characters, and he opens up and he comes to the demolition and he says, what do you think of that? And then he
like
kind of puts it in your court, do I like it? If I would have said, you know what, that looks like hell, you get something
yeah,
else, that would have been the end of my deal right there. Of course, if he says he like, I love it, but I had no clue that that's what I was going to be. And, like you said, this is the big leagues now. I want a job with them. And I wasn't going to do just anything, but that was right up my alley.
yeah,
So, and then, Vince is so good. He says, well, first we got to check with Bill Eadie to make sure that you're going to be the right fit with him. And I really respected Vince for that because he left it up to Bill. Bill could have said, "No, I don't want
yeah,
Barry, my partner. I want
yeah,
so and so." You know, so it was just because of the friendship I had with all my friends, and he had, and we all talked. And then plus I wanted to make sure I had the right partner too.
yeah. It
But
has to work.
as soon as he said Bill Eadie, I knew right away this is going to be a top tag team. This isn't going to be, some jabroni putting everybody over. It was it was the real deal. So
Yeah.
I was very excited about
Well, and you think about it too, Barry, that there's been a lot of gimmicks where somebody lay them out for you and you're going, yeah, that sounds like great. That's going to be awesome. And then for whatever reason, it doesn't happen.
it. Right.
And I'm sure you're thinking like this has all the ingredients, but like you said, it has to work.
Yeah.
And when it comes down to it, I mean, seriously, I think, probably initially that, Vince had tried to get the Road Warriors up there, and for whatever reason, they were making a lot of money. They didn't want to go. It was just like, so like, we got to find like an alternative. And
Right.
if that's the way it started, whatever, so be it. But I remember. initially that it wasn't even a comparison after
Yeah.
you guys started. It was this completely different. I kind of liken it in a sense for like the tag team, like the Undertaker of tag teams, that it had to be the right people. It had to be the right
Yeah.
person, the right people. But man, it didn't take long. And I know at some point you probably did realize we got something here. But I
Yeah.
remember thinking early on, this isn't replacing Road Warriors. These guys are all on their own. This whole thing,
Yeah.
this whole gimmick is original to me. I thought it was just, and you guys like right out of the gate, it just worked. I don't the chemistry between you guys was palpable. You could see it.
Yeah, it was
Yeah,
incredible. And what a lot of people don't know, so you're up there and you got the greatest tag teams ever. You got,
yeah,
you know, and here all of a sudden there's this new strong two big guys in a tag team. And we had to kind of think, how are we going to work with all these guys? Because you have to be strong coming
yeah,
in so the people go, holy shit, you
yeah,
know. But yet we got to be able to work with the guys so then they want to work with us. So I mean it was quite a thing, to figure out how to do that and make it so nobody hated us. Because at first they wanted to get over on us to make them look better.
right,
So we had to get it into the head that they needed to trust us. We're the heels, and we're going to get you guys over, but we're going to look really strong. And then somehow we're going to get you a tag to where you're going to make us fly everywhere. So then the
yeah,
people even would say, well, hey, somebody could beat these guys, and then you'd screw them and win. And that was kind of our philosophy, and it worked. Because it could have been bad where if we would have worked with everybody and worked even with everybody,
right,
that we would have just been a regular tag team. We wouldn't have been the Demolition. And that's like how the Road Warriors got over. They beat everybody up. They didn't give anybody anything, and that's what got them over. So,
yeah.
so we had to really think of how to do that.
Yeah, and that was what also was great about that tag team division because and I don't remember really ever seeing it before in professional wrestling that where you could take a tag team, for example, like the Hart Foundation, where you've got, Brett is this fast-moving, sleek wrestler in there. You got Anvil, who's powerful, but he's not a huge guy. And you look at that matchup, you're like, there's no way that these guys can compete. Well, absolutely they could because of the different styles and how they matched up. But you guys had to be able to do that. And like the combination, like the way I look at it, it wasn't just like you said, you could just be two monsters. And love the Warlord, love Barbarian, but they couldn't do what you guys did in the ring. And then, like you said, the psychology of it and making and getting it over and working with the two teams, but then also you guys could cut promos. I mean, I used to love doing promos with you guys because it was, as they say, butter. I mean, it was just so smooth. And I'm sure initially it took you a little while to do that, to get there. I saw it happen. But man, you guys were two of the best once you started getting into that rhythm. And so I believe it was just a combination all the way around. But if you, like you said, weren't willing and had the understanding of making it work and putting these teams over and letting people think it out there, maybe they could beat them. And then you guys put the hammer down, and like you said, at some point they had to give you the belts. There was no
Sean,
question about it.
I gotta go on your podcast every day. You make me feel like $1 million
Well,
here,
I had
Good.
a great seat, Barry. That's why I'm saying, like, I had a great seat for all of
Yeah,
this,
I
and I
appreciate
was
it.
I was a student because I didn't grow up with it, and so to me, I was a sponge, and I wanted to be successful at it. But I did, and I got to be around that triumvirate that ran the place between Vince and Bruce and Pat and all these other guys, and I just took it in, and that's how I kind of learned, and I like would watch. To me, the promos were really important, especially at that time, because that's how we sold the guys, the
Yeah,
event center, and they got to hear you. There were countless guys that I would see who were great in the ring, great look, but they couldn't get in front of that microphone and do it, and you were dead. Like if you had to depend on a manager that could take you so far, But you guys had it all, and I know. I mean,
I
to
really
me, there,
I really
and
appreciate
I
that.
love the Road Warriors. I love Mike and Joe and everything they did. But you guys were, to me, completely different.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that, and that's what we tried to be,
Uh,
and it was hard for me to yell all the time and everything, and I want to talk, but I have such a nice voice, a baby
yeah,
face voice. It was hard to be the Demolition unless I yelled, and yelling in an interview
intensity.
isn't the way that you should be doing things, but it just worked at that time.
Yeah.
There wasn't anybody in the territory that did it, so it worked.
Well, and it was
And
like
Bill,
like Jake had his bit. Like his was
yeah,
the. I always call it the slow burn, brother.
yeah.
You want to do that. You don't think you want to. Yeah, I know what you're talking. But you
Yeah.
needed that intensity for demolition,
Yeah, and
and
Bill had that low, the
oh
low
God, yeah,
voice where he
yeah,
could talk loud,
yeah,
He wasn't yelling, he was just talking loud. And he
yeah.
still has that voice when we go out.
I'm a great. I have a great appreciation for voices. I thought that Mike Hegseth had a great voiceover voice, and I think
Yeah,
Bill also would have been like
yeah,
it was. Could have done voiceover work on the side. To this day, he could. He's got
right.
he's still got tremendous pipes, as they say. But the success of Demolition and it shows by how long you ended up with the belts because people don't understand necessarily how that works. They just say, well, they just decided that they were going to let them hold the belts that long. No, it all depends on how it's received. If fans still want it, then they're not going to question it. You can force
Yeah.
so much, and it showed just by how long you guys had those belts, what a force you were.
Yeah, and I think a lot to do with it is because we could work with every team.
Yeah,
If you were a smaller team, we still had great matches. If you were a bigger team, same thing. And I think that's what the tag team needed. And as heels, we could get the baby faces over even by beating them, and then it
right.
made them better.
Elevated them. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think we ever won a match legally ever as the Demolition. I mean, we cheated all the time, and that's
Yeah.
where Fuji, made the
Yeah.
team so good because Fuji didn't do anything for the whole match except whatever
Bring
had
out
to be
Kane.
done. So
Yeah.
it worked.
Yeah, absolutely. And it did for a very long time. And as you said, at some point things you get a ride and you got a great one, but at some point it Bill was his health was in question at the time. And then they tried to bring in Crush, and we all know how that works. But and nothing taken away from him. But I just said it's demolition or nothing. It was the same
Right.
thing where the Road Warriors were when Mike would be out and they try and pair Joe with somebody and it just didn't work. You
No,
guys were it was demolition and that's all there was to it. Uh, you spent a great deal of your time with the tag teams, but you also spent a lot of time as a solo talent, which is another uh, difficult thing to really succeed at. I, of course, remember because of Repo Man, but you did, you went south and also kept working down there. But that the Repo Man, though, I thought got over pretty damn well for the time that you were able to do it. And I just always wondered, like, how did that come about? And, at some point, a lot of people that are in a tag team or something like that, you can't just go and do something else, but you pulled it off.
Yeah, it was funny because I was going to quit wrestling for good.
Yeah.
You know, I was going to get a regular job and go on with my life, and it was just a great time of my life. And then Vince called me up and wanted me to still work, and then we
Yeah.
ended up coming up with that gimmick, the Repo Man. But when I talked to Vince, I told him, I said, this isn't going to be. I'm not going to be Hulk Hogan or Randy Savage or any of these guys. I'm going to be the guy who gets them over, and I don't mind doing that.
Mm.
At that part of my life, I loved wrestling so much. I just wanted to be in the ring, and I wanted to work with the guys who were the top guys, and eventually turned babyface because I wanted to be a babyface as the Repo Man, and do Make-A-Wish things, and do
Yeah.
things that help real life stuff, and I ended up wrestling, shoot, all the top guys. I mean, Jake the Snake, The Undertaker, Randy Savage, Bulldog, Kurt Hennig. I
Yeah.
mean, it was like it was my next dream was to work with all these guys, and there was no pressure on me at all. It was fun because I didn't have to. I wasn't the guy on the card that had to have the best match on the card. I had to have a good, entertaining, and fun matches, and that's what I did. But then it got to the point where it started getting kind of tough in there, because I was a heel, and pretty soon I wasn't a good heel anymore.
Hmm.
It was that part went away, from the fans. And I told Vince, I said, Vince, I think it's time for to change me babyface and let me steal a couple of belts from the bad guys and give them to the good guys, or do something.
Right.
And he said, no, that's not going to happen. You're not going to be a babyface. So then at that part of my life, I thought, this is a good time that I'm gonna get out. And then I gave Vince my notice, and he's, are you sure you want to? And I said, yeah.
Mm.
I just, it just wasn't fun anymore, and
Right.
I wanted to be home. My son was getting older, and I wanted to be with him, and get on with my life. And that's when I left and said my goodbyes to everybody, and that was the end of it. And then once a few months later, Ric Flair calls me up again and says, Barry, I want you down here. And I mean, it just,
Pulls you back in.
yeah. And then I
Yeah.
had the time of my life down there. I mean,
Yeah.
I've had the greatest life out of everybody. And I tell everybody that I love life. I want to
Well,
live to be 150 years old if I could.
yeah. Well,
I
it's
want to
been a
see my,
great.
I want to see
uh,
my grandkids' kids.
Yeah, one thing though I do wanted to ask you about, and I mean, I've talked many times about how difficult that life was with the WWF. It was kind of, you make a deal with the devil, in the sense you're going to have everything you could ever possibly want, fame and money and adoration from people, but then again, you're going to be on the road for 300 plus days a year. When you do get home, it's going to be for just a couple. You're going to try and sleep, get your laundry, and then you're back out there again. And you can't, and you don't want to stop it because you don't know how long this ride's going to last.
Right.
Uh, how did you do that though? Because you have a great relationship with your family, and you said your son. How did you balance that during that period of time
I
when you'd go
mean,
home?
when I was in the business, the whole
Yeah,
time I
when
was
when
in
when
it.
it was really riding, like with Demolition and going
Oh, well, my son was very young at that time,
right.
and I used to tell him, that Daddy's got to go on the road. You could watch me on TV, and I say, whenever I stick my tongue out, that means I love you and I miss you.
Wow.
So that's kind of how I did it. And then when I'd come home after 3 weeks, he says, Daddy, I saw you. You love me.
Right.
And that was kind of how it was. But and at that time it was hard. We didn't have cell phones or anything,
Yeah. Yeah. And
and
you miss a lot too.
yeah, and you make a long distance phone call and it costs you 30, $40 or whatever. And you
Right.
do that every night. All of a sudden you're spending 200 or 300 a week and you got a check for $800. It's like, oh, wait a minute here. What do I
Yeah.
do? But you make the best of it, and then you try to fly your family into a town where you're going to be traveling different places. And that's what I was saying earlier. The family was the most important part, and you did everything you could to keep that together. But thank God I had the greatest wife in the world. She ran the house. She raised my son when I wasn't there, and she was phenomenal. And I'm still with her 40 some years. So,
Yeah. Well, you say it was all worth it, but you do miss a lot. I know a lot of people, obviously you took it very seriously of keeping those relationships healthy, but for a lot it was too much,
oh,
and they paid for it. They ended up paying for it the rest of their lives as far as lost relationships with kids and stuff.
yeah.
But at one point, like you said, when it got to, and I guess when you're probably down south, it was a little easier to go to have some kind of a family life. But when you did go get home, were you able to shut it down and just try and be this normal neighbor?
At first I didn't.
Uh,
When we had the big run with the demolition, it was pretty nerve-wracking because you had to perform, you had to do everything, and you're on the road for 3 weeks, four
yeah,
weeks, 5 weeks, sometimes straight, and you get up at 6 in the morning, and I mean you're working all day, all night, and the pressure's on you, and
yeah,
all of a sudden you get home and you're traveling 4 or 5 hours to get home, it's hard to all of a sudden go, oh, everything's fine and dandy. It took you a day or so to unwind. And right away I'd go to the gym and I'd train and then I'd have to settle down a little bit. So when you go home, you're like, oh, okay, here we go. Now life is normal. And I had great neighbors, great friends that didn't, hey, what was it like wrestling, Hulk
Uh,
Hogan last week? I mean, they didn't even bring it up. It was about, hey, let's go fishing or let's go, the football game or something. And that's what really grounded me was, and the wife wasn't a wrestling fan, so it's like, you know, just forget about that and get home.
yeah.
You're with the family now, and I mean, she would ground me pretty fast.
Well, that's great. That's great.
Yeah.
How much of a toll though over the years did because I always liken it to being in a car accident every day when you go into the ring. The jolts and the body shots you take. How much of a toll did it take on your body? I mean, and I know I saw you. You still move really well. How much of a toll did it take on you though over the years?
It took a pretty good toll, and during the time when I was working, when I had partners, it was great because then I could stay out of the ring a little longer, or when he would get hurt, I'd be in the
Hmm.
ring longer. And when you're on the road, you didn't even really realize how bad it was because you just were used to it. It was once you finally got out of wrestling, you just went, "Whoa, I can't hardly get out of bed," or this or that, and then you've had a couple of knee surgeries. I've had 5 different knee surgeries, a couple
Wow.
different shoulder surgeries. The back is bad, concussions, many concussions, and I'm really feeling it now.
Yeah.
And I'm 66 years old now, and it's wearing on me, but that was the life I chose. It's the same as those football players that are out there that are getting hit every day. Same thing, you
Yeah.
know.
Well, and I know one really bad particular shot is that chair shot you took from Tully Blanchard that
Yeah.
you've talked about how you still feel the effects from this to this day, and maybe at the time you didn't realize just how bad that was. And I don't think you even went to the hospital, right? You just kept
No,
working.
no,
So,
I had to because we were getting a big push.
uh,
I didn't want to say nothing to anybody or anything. I just, sucked it up and went and did it again. But yeah, I really still feel that. Now that we're talking about it, I got a little feeling right in my head. I feel, that it's
uh,
like,
I
it's
remember
like,
it well.
yeah, yeah. And, I don't sleep. I don't know if that's part of it, but, and then you don't know if a lot of it's just because you're getting older. But, I don't remember certain things. And, like the stuff you're asking me, I've gone over a lot of times with different interviews
Yeah.
and it's really good for me to think of this stuff. And you're asking good questions because there's different things than I've had. But, that's part of my treatment is, you know, trying to remember and doing that stuff. And it really helps me, you
Yeah,
know.
because I know you said you used to be a whiz with numbers and that kind of thing. But at some point, and I think it's hard for a lot of people, it's like professional athletes too, that it's hard for them to realize, okay, it's time. At what point did you realize, okay, this is it? And was it a gradual thing, or was it a something happened in the ring and you said, okay, really, that's it,
Well,
I'm done.
well, my last big hurrah was when I was in WCW. I had that truck match with Dustin Rhodes, and I was
Hmm.
the Blacktop bully, and I thought I was going to get a really good run from that, and I had some time off, so I was really healthy. I got in good shape training wise. My son was older now, and I lived in North Carolina, so uh, I was where my wife was from, so the family, everything was there, and I was home all the time. And I thought this was gonna be a top spot for a long time. And then when I got fired, when Eric Bischoff called me up and fired me, and that was the end of my job there, I thought this is probably going to be the end of my career. But he told me he was going to hire me back. But by this time, I'm already thinking, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? Because, now I've had these breaks and I was in real estate, you know, is as soon as I got fired from the Blacktop Bully, I started real estate, selling homes and everything, and I was doing pretty well. And
Hmm.
and then I ended up we called John Norton and we called Vince, and we were kind of laughing with him trying to get a job back with Vince. And we were selling cars at the time. And
Uh-huh.
Vince says, I got really nothing for you. So then we called Eric Bischoff, and he says, hey, we're at the Target Center. Come on down and let's have a match. So me and John teamed up and we had a match together. And it was just fun seeing all the guys and everything. But I really didn't want to get back into wrestling. But I thought, wow, what the heck? These guys got guaranteed contracts now. So
Yeah.
so Eric says, well, hey, come up to the office and let's talk. So I went up to the office with Eric, and I'm sitting in his office, and he says to me, he goes, Barry, he goes, well, I don't know what we're going to do with you. What do you think you're worth? And I said to Eric, I says, well, I'm worth probably 1 million, maybe $3 million a year.
Yeah.
And I was really serious.
Yeah.
And he's sitting in the big chair, and I'm sitting down here, and he looks at me, and he's really he starts laughing, you know. And I said, "What, Eric?" And he goes, "Well, how can I justify paying you $3 million?" And I said, "Easy." I said, "I'll beat Hulk Hogan. I'll beat all the top guys in 30 seconds." And I said, "I'll have great matches in 30 seconds, and I'll be the guy. I'll be the 3 million,
Uh-huh.
$4 million guy." And he got real serious. He looks at me. He goes, "Barry, that's the greatest answer I've ever heard." He says, "But that ain't gonna happen."
Yeah.
And I said, "I figured it wasn't gonna happen, but you
Uh-huh.
asked me what I was worth."
Yeah.
And I said, "I'm not gonna tell you I'm worth $10. I'm gonna tell you
Yeah.
I'm worth millions, you
Sell
know?"
yourself short. Yeah.
So he says, well, I got a figure for you. So he gives me the figure, and I said, "You know what? That's good too." And he says, "You're at the end of your career." He
Mhm.
says, "I think you should get paid well for it." And he says, "You won't even hardly have to work." And I said, I really like that. So that was when I knew that was the end of my career. And I probably worked maybe 2 days a month, maybe. And,
Wow.
I worked with Fit Finley, the boss man, all these other guys. But, anyways, the Blacktop Bully, that was when I figured that was going to be the end of my career. And it was. So I
Yeah.
was already thinking, what am I going to do with my life?
Yeah. People love to knock Eric, but I also know that he did take care of some people and was true to his word in many cases.
Yeah,
So,
I
uh,
really like Eric.
yeah.
You know, and I did a podcast with him not too long ago, and we talked about it. And I said, "Why did you fire me?"
Yeah.
And we talked about it, and he said he had no choice. The office made him do it. And then I said, "Well, why didn't you bring me back as the Blacktop Bully?" And
Yeah.
he says, I don't know, you
Yeah.
know." But it
Yeah.
was just, you get lost in the shuffle, and
But he did bring you back.
but he did bring me
That's
back and
awesome.
took care of me. And then
Yeah.
that's when I ended up hooking up with a buddy of mine, and I started a company, and it went very well. And it just, 24 hours a day, I'm working again,
Yeah.
but now I'm at home every night going, sleeping in the same bed. That was kind of nice.
Yeah, and I wanted to get into that a little bit, Barry, that um, you know, when people are gifted people and they have the blessing of performing in front of massive crowds as professional athletes, which you guys were, um, at some point because you're dependent on the meat wagon you're dragging around, and at some point it doesn't work as well as it did when you were in your 20s.
Yeah.
How big of a transition was that for you to go from that life, and not just for the what you were doing in the ring, but also, of being in front of that light?
It was, when I was the Blacktop Boy, when that was the end of it, that kind of hurt when I got out of it. Then it was
Yeah.
like, I wanted to be in the limelight. I wanted to be around it. But then after it was done, after a month or two, when I came down to reality, against my wife, it's like, we don't need this, and I said, no, we don't. And we're going to be fine. We had enough money we could, pay a house off, or, a small house, and, we get regular jobs, and have a regular life, and be a family. So I was on board with that now, but it did take a couple of months to get to that point.
Hmm.
And when we finally moved back to my home, Minnesota, that's when I had a buddy of mine who thinks like I do. He works hard, He worked for Granger, which was a big company, and his ethic there was incredible. And I was selling real estate at the time, doing pretty well. And he called me up. He says, Barry, we want to start a new business. And I told him, I said, I really don't want to start a business. I
Right.
said, I'm starting to do pretty well, and I just don't want to have the responsibility. He goes, no, no, think about it. So we talked about it, and then I thought, you know what? He's the best partner that I could have because he's just like I am, where, you know, he works and the job is first when you're doing that, and you'll do everything you can to make it. And that's
Mhm.
kind of what our whole lives have been. You do everything to make it. And we ended up starting the business in his garage, and we went to Chicago to buy a machine. We figured we're going to get into pad printing, but we thought, what are we going to pad print on? So we went to Chicago to buy the machine, and we said, well, what are we going to do? And then we saw a guy with a jackhammer, and he had a hard hat on, and it had a logo on it. And we both looked at that and went, we're going to pad print logos on hard hats. And he used to do that for another company. And I
Oh,
said, well, let's make it happen. So we bought the machine. We're in a little garage. And one of the first orders that comes in, the Minnesota Twins calls us up.
wow.
So we're in the garage and
Nice start.
we're making like we're this freaking huge company, and we're in this little tiny garage. My desk is over here and his is over here. And we never even knew how to do this. And I'm the guy doing the artwork. I've never done nothing on a computer before, you know?
Wow.
So Tom is on the deal, and he goes, Barry, you got to call on line two, and then he says, yeah, Barry's down at the dock over on 12th dock. So we're looking
You're
like
in the
we're in a big
garage.
factory. And I get on there and go, yeah, yeah, this is Barry, thanks, Tom, and we're doing all this stuff. And the lady goes, yeah, I'm from the Minnesota Twins, and here, I'll send you the logo. And I don't even know how to open up the logo on the
Oh my,
computer. It's one of the first orders we got. And I said, well, how many hard hats do you want? She said, well, we need about 50,000 of them. Can you handle that? I said, no problem at all. 50,000 of them.
like,
And then I said, let me call you back. So I go to Tom. I go, Tom, how in the hell are we going to do this? 50,000 hard hats. That's like 3 truckloads coming into us
yeah.
in the neighborhood in the garage. Well, we ended up bidding this thing out, and thank God we got beat by somebody else because
Uh,
really we
uh,
didn't want it. But that's how the whole business started, and then we kind of figured it out.
yeah.
I went and
Hey,
I took
it's all a work, right? It's
I
all a
took
work. You
all
just
I
gotta,
took all my classes
yeah,
on
yeah,
myself, learn how to do the artwork, and he's doing all the pad printing, and pretty soon we made it work. We went from that one to another building, then we bought our own building, then we got employees, and I mean it was just a really neat process.
yeah. Well, I always tell people that wrestling really is life.
Yeah.
If you pay attention, you can learn everything. And I'm sure that you reached into that bag of your experience from wrestling.
Well, it's
The
the
psychology with people and
yeah,
just facing adversity and everything. I mean, it goes on and on.
our whole life in wrestling was a work.
Yeah,
You did something that the fans the people who bought our product, and you had to give them a product that they would buy. And
yeah,
that was the same thing in the pad printing and the hard hat business, the safety vest business. It just it just explodes, and our customers were our best friends.
yeah,
So everybody we sold to called us back again. And being in the wrestling business, I wrestled in Boston or Chicago or LA, and somebody would call from Chicago, and I'd say, "Oh yeah, do you ever go to the Goat Restaurant?" And they go, "Oh, you've been there." And pretty soon, all of a sudden, you got something you're talking about with the customer. They ain't going anywhere else. They're going with
yeah,
you,
yeah.
and you become their friends. And that's how our business exploded. It was kind of like the wrestling business, you
Yeah,
know.
absolutely. I mean, it is. It's like I said, wrestling is life. It's there's no question in my mind that everything that I learned along the way. I've done all these different things since, but I still know that I wouldn't even have a career if Vince McMahon didn't take a chance on me and put me up in front of a microphone. And you talk about first years. Oh my God, I was terrible. I look at
Well,
and I look in YouTube. They still have some stuff up there. I'm like, God, how in the world did they keep me?
you
Because
know what though? But you're your worst enemy
oh
because
yeah,
you weren't like what you thought you were. You were good,
Yeah.
otherwise you would have been gone the next day.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And we watched you grow, and it was fun seeing that. But there's a lot of bad rap on Vince, and I probably said a few things about him and this and that, but I've never tried to be negative. Vince was unbelievable. He was
Yeah.
a he was a genius. He knew what he was talking about. He was always good to me, no matter what. Even though he let me go or whatever, he was the boss. I was the employee, and he had the right to do whatever he was doing to make himself money. And Vince was unbelievable. He
Yeah.
gave he gave. Just think of all the people that were in the business that made millions. That was because of Vince.
Absolutely. And like I said, you can, to me, you can separate the other stuff, and I didn't really know anything about it even when I was there. Um, but as far as what he did for the business, and like, Terry Bollea, like Hulk too,
Yeah,
Hulk Hogan. Without Hulk Hogan, nobody would have had the careers that they had.
yeah.
So yeah, you do have to give credit where credit is due. And you know, I know you're still living a good life. And it's amazing because I think probably when you first left the business, when you were working full time, there weren't the opportunities that there are now. They certainly had some of these shows, but now, I mean, like every week, if you want to work, you want to go somewhere and do something, I know the offers are there for you guys. You
Well,
seem like you're busier than you've ever been.
oh, it's unbelievable. I
Crazy.
I was just in Tulsa, Oklahoma this weekend, and Sergeant Slaughter was there, and Buff Bagwell, Sting. Yeah, I mean, it was incredible. And it's funny because I'm with Bill all the time, and I look
Yeah.
at Bill and I go, Bill, what are you doing to me? And he goes, what do you mean? And I said, well, I thought you said we were only going to be out twice a month. Well, all of a sudden, three
Yeah.
weeks out of the month, and then now 4 weeks out of the month, and he'll call and he'll go, Barry, I know Teresa's going to get mad at you, but I got a good date here. It's just one shot, you'll be in and out, and it ends up being 3 days, and but really, really, I love it.
Yeah.
We're the luckiest guy. We sit down and you sign autographs and you talk to these fans who are unbelievable. They
Yeah.
know your whole life. And the worst part of this whole thing is the traveling. If you didn't have to travel and just, you know, we're there seeing your friends and signing
Yeah.
autographs, it's the greatest gig ever. And
No, no
and
kidding.
you're right. In the last, 8, 9 years, 10 years, it's fun going on.
Well, and think about it. I mean, we're talking, man, go way over 30 plus years now when this was, 40, where and these people still they want to hear it. We do a podcast, people want to hear it. You go to the shows, there's lines out the door. It really does tell you what a special time that was.
Yep.
That period, that has never been matched. And it was. I call it's the golden era, and I believe it truly was.
Well, and
So,
then now, we got another action figure coming out.
yeah,
The WWE is doing
yeah,
this, and they're doing pre-orders right now. And I'm looking at it like going, holy cow! Now I got personal appearances. Now people are going to want those signed.
yeah,
And then I don't know if you're going to bring it up, but and then I got a book.
yeah. I
That's
was. Hold
Yeah.
that up nice and that so everybody can see it.
Can you see it all right?
Beautiful. When is
Yeah.
it? When is it hitting
It's
the
it's out right.
shelves if they
It's
sell?
out right now. You can buy it on Amazon, and it the first week it was doing phenomenal. It was
Yeah,
one of the top books being sold on Kindle. It was number one for quite a while, and
yeah.
then number two and number three, and that was before I really even promoted it. But that was, I never thought that I'd be writing a book, and
What
I
was that
thought,
process like? Especially you probably go into it going like, what? You always think I don't have that many stories, and like, oh yeah, you do.
Sean, I got a million
Yeah,
stories,
no,
and
you do.
and it was kind of hard because I only, I didn't want to make it too long, but it's 300 and some pages, and I only got 5, 6, 7, 8 stories in there.
Yeah.
I got a million stories, I got a
Well,
million
another
books
book
to write,
coming.
but it was really fun remembering some of the
Uh,
stories in there. And I got some about Rick Rude and Kurt Hennig and Ernie Ladd and the Junkyard Dog and Bill and Neidhart and the Hart Foundation. I had fun with it, and it was a lot of work. And
uh,
being retired, I'm really not retired. Being gone with Bill all the time and writing a book and being with the kids, and I mean, you know, but
no,
I
you
hope
guys
I
are
hope
busy there.
yeah,
Hold
I
it up
hope
again
people get out
until,
and I hope
go
people
ahead.
get out and buy the book because it was
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah, hold it up and t tell everybody the name of it again. I want to make
Yeah,
sure
it's
everybody gets.
it it's Sickles, Studs, and Stolen Cars. So
Yeah,
it starts back when I was in Robbinsdale, and
yeah,
me and Kurt Hennig and the Road Warriors and all of us start when we started in the business, and then the different territories I was in all the way up until now. I talk about my wife and my son, the
mm,
grandkids, and all my friends. I got a million friends.
yeah.
And,
And one thing that really is brutal about this business is you look back at so many great people that you were really close to. I was blessed to be around them. Kurt Hennig was one of my favorites all time. Rick Rude, all these guys, and if you're lucky, uh, you get to live into your 70s or possibly 80s. But a lot of them we've lost, and you go down the list, and there's a big price to pay. And Barry, you're fortunate that you've been able to take care of yourself, but look how many that we've lost.
yeah, it's I think I had, when I was counting them one day, it was about
Uh,
75 guys that I was
you
friends
knew,
with. And
worked
I,
with,
I
or
quit counting because it's over 100 probably now, and a lot of those I've wrestled and grew up with, and
yeah,
it's terrible, and it's the road does it to you when you get injuries. You get an injury and you need to work the next day and you start taking painkillers,
yeah,
and pretty soon you can't sleep, so now you're taking sleeping pills and you're hurt and you're working and the stress, and pretty soon it just all catches up to you
yeah,
after years and years of it.
yeah. And it is, like I said, it's
So
like you're in a car wreck for have that many car wrecks in your life, which literally
right,
that's really what it was about. Your
right.
body
Yeah, and
can't
I
take
think
it.
nowadays it's a whole different thing. They're not wrestling as much.
Right.
They get injured, they take time off, and I think the guys and the girls are going to live to be a lot longer from this business.
Well, I hope so. So you able to get out on the golf course? Folks may not really know that. I mean, what a tremendous golfer that you are. I think at one point you were scratch.
Yeah,
So you still get out?
yeah,
To,
I do not as much. I
yeah,
was building this house that I'm in now up in Ross Common, so I finally finished it pretty much. So next spring I'm really going to play golf. I'm going to go fishing, and I'm going to really do some things with the grandkids. But here's what's terrible. I'm getting older, and I hurt so bad. I can't hit the ball from the back tees anymore. I
oh
can't
boy.
swing normal anymore. So I had to figure out how I can just hit it a couple hundred yards, 230 yards or whatever, and get it in the middle.
Yeah.
So now I'm doing that, and I'm playing the upper tees. And then I couldn't putt anymore. So now I went to a 48-inch putter, one of those big, huge ones.
Hmm.
And now I'm putting again. So I'm getting my game back again with all the injuries I have.
Well, I'll tell you, my grandfather loved golf. He just worshiped the game. He was an old-time semi-pro baseball player, and then a lot of guys go from that or end up being very good golfers, and he was the same way. And he got into his 80s, and long before that, he realized it was a short game. He'd
Yeah.
say, like, you three putts a sin. That's what he
Yeah.
used to tell me, but that's exactly what he would do, and he beat the pants off guys all the time because he just straight down the middle maybe a little less than a buck 50 in
Yeah.
yardage, but did
Well,
it consistently.
my problem is just what I've always had in my life. I want to be the best.
Yes, there.
So this is killing me when my son goes out there and hits it, 280, and
Yeah,
but he's off the fairway, and I hit it my 220 or 230, and I'm dead center, and he's going, Dad, I outdrove you. And I said, well, let's see how many times it takes you to get into each
right. And
hole,
that's the real test there.
And
But
I
any day on
putt
a
and
golf
he's hitting
course is a
six. Yeah.
yeah, any day on a golf course is a good day.
Yeah. So Sean,
Barry,
so you're living in Arizona.
yep,
I am coming to Phoenix here pretty soon, and I'm going to call you.
please. Maybe we
Yeah,
can get on the course.
yeah. Bill and I are we're in. I think it's in March or something. Maybe we're coming down there. So I'm going to call you, and I don't know if we'll have time for golf, but we'll have to go out and I'll take you out to dinner or something.
Yeah, you never know. We may end up at the same shows too. So I'm
Yeah,
hoping.
yeah, that
Uh,
could be.
Yeah, you never know. Barry, this is awesome. I'm going to get Bill on. I hope at one point. The last time, and I didn't mention, but the last time that we actually did a podcast together, you and Bill were traveling to a show. I think outside of Chicago. Do you remember? And you're in a limousine getting
Yeah,
You're being driven up there, and
yeah,
I stayed on the with you on the phone. I think you guys were. I had my where I was for about 2 hours. And
yeah.
folks, you could it's still up on prime time with Sean Mooney. But what a great conversation that was. So I'm looking
Sean,
forward
I
to
love
getting
you.
Bill one on one. But that was fun.
Yeah, Sean, I love you, man. You're a good guy, and it's fun to talk old stories and old friends, and
Yeah, it was a
good.
great time. It really was. And I'm really looking forward to your induction into the Hall of Fame. That has to happen. I'm hoping it's this next one, but everybody knows Demolition's got to be in the Hall of Fame.
Well, I appreciate that, and I don't know. Like, there's been so many
Yeah.
teams out there, but
Oh,
it'd be quite the honor to be inducted
no,
there. I wouldn't even
it's
know.
going to happen. It is going to
I wouldn't
happen.
even know what to say,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
the hard part is they're probably going to go, "Oh, you got 2 minutes and get out of there," and
yeah.
and that could be good too, I might end up having tears in my eye. I won't even be able to talk. Who knows?
Well deserved, and that would be put the icing on it all because what a
Yeah,
tremendous career, Barry. I'm sure you
yeah,
never thought when you were that kid at
no.
Robbinsdale that this is going to be the ride that you had.
And what's funny is that last time when we were at the Hall of Fame, Bill and I go up to the room, and the first guy that greets us is Bruce Pritchard, who I love Bruce Pritchard.
Yeah, yeah, me too.
And he sat and talked to us and made us comfortable being there again.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then CM Punk came up to us, who I've never met CM Punk. What a freaking gentleman he was. He
Hmm.
talked to us for 5, 10 minutes, just a hell of a guy. And then we talked to The Undertaker and Stone Cold, and it was fun seeing the guys again.
Yeah.
So
Well, you're a part of that.
hopefully it'll happen. You never know.
Yeah. No, it will. Mark my words. It's got to happen. I tell anybody I've connected to WWE, when's it happening? These guys need to be in there. So it's going to happen.
All right.
Very
Well, thank
great,
you for
great talking
having
to you,
me on your
man.
podcast.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
hope to see you soon. We're going to make it happen.
All right. You take care, righty?